This is Inside the Right. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, longtime Republican operative Tim Miller. So, Tim, Republicans have been contending with a difficult last couple weeks. First, with the departure of Ken Buck, followed by the announcement of Mike Gallagher's impending resignation. That would bring the Republicans' House majority down to only one seat. Would you predict that there are more resignations coming on the Republican side?
It's possible. Fox News, Chad Pegram is the Hill reporter over there. Reported today that there are definitely some Republicans who are wanting to resign, that they're looking for the exits. They're seeing the payday. There's some, I guess potential worries for them that they won't make as much cash if they wait until after the election than versus they do now. So it's very possible that these guys like bungle their way into a Hakeem Jeffries speakership. I think that the amount of pressure that would increase on like the last person that would flip it over
Right.
is, I guess, probably too much to like really get your hopes up for this. But I think that what the nuts of it is that any quasi-normal person that's in the House of Representatives on the Republican side is miserable, can't do any, doesn't feel like they can do anything. I want to talk about that part in a second. Doesn't feel like they can do anything, hates all the MAGAs, and is just ready to just call it a day and cash in. And as a result, as we've said a couple times on this show, these guys just they literally aren't capable of doing anything. Like, I don't think that they could name a post office after Donald Trump. There is not anything they can do without Democratic help.
Is there any acknowledgement from these quote unquote moderates that they actually have some agency here, that they don't have to keep like contracting every ounce of their power to the extremists in their own party? Like, isn't this kind of a problem of their own creation?
Absolutely, it is, and it really pisses me off, to be honest, Brian, because there's some I get it coming from a progressive point of view. There's some progressives that are just like, joy, these guys are quitting, like hell yeah, Republicans in disarray, and Hakeem Jeffries is maybe speaker, and I totally get all that. Like at the same time, man, I since I kind of know these people, there's a little personal element to it. It's just so disappointing, and they're so pathetic and what really bugs me is that like there's a lot of excuse making for them. A lot of people are out there saying, well, it is miserable to be in the House these days, and the MAGAs and Donald Trump and blah blah blah. And it's like, no, have some backbone. You can't imagine, like, just think about John McCain, for example. I'm sure some of your viewers didn't love everything about John McCain, but John McCain broke with the Republican Party several times: campaign finance reform, immigration, and he took heat from the right. Could you imagine John McCain ever saying, I'm going to quit my job in the middle of my term to go work for Boeing or
Yeah.
something? Like,
Yeah.
what? No, like, you have an obligation, you have a job, you have duty. Like, this is supposed to be public service. And so, man, if you're Mike Gallagher and you believe that we should be doing Ukraine funding, for example, and you don't believe we should be doing stupid impeachments, then how about you just say that? How about you just say that and take some angry phone calls into your office rather than quitting and going to work for Palantir? And it's really pathetic.
Well, is there any worry that when you have these people who may speak out for a moment, but then ultimately resign, yes, it may redound momentarily to the Democrats' benefit if they get closer and closer to a majority, but is there any worry that those people are inevitably going to be replaced by somebody who will toe the party line? And so you have like a higher chance of homogeneity in the Republican conference and more MAGA people instead of less.
I think that's definitely happening. And that might have happened anyway. That might have been an inevitable trajectory anyway, but we could have delayed it. Yeah, look, this country needs two like functional political parties. Even if you prefer the Democrats, it would be better for the Republicans to have a heterodox party that is not lockstep in a cult of an authoritarian. I mean, like, that's just obviously true.
Yeah.
And so, if everybody that is not on board with the Trump MAGA authoritarian project like self deports out of the party and out of Congress, then there's not going to be anybody left. And so, yeah, I do think that's something to be really worried about. And to be honest, I like it again. It makes what Mike Gallagher is doing even more shameful to me, because it's like, this is actually important, right? It's not as if, oh, he's quitting and like whatever, they're not going to vote on anything this year. Like, no, this is important. Like, this fight for Ukraine funding, the intra Republican fight, the need for good Republicans to stand up matters right now as much as it ever has. And so he should have a duty and obligation to stay and do this. This fucker, do you know this, Brian? He sent a letter to his colleagues when he was leaving, and he ends it with Semper Fi. Semper Fi, always faithful. Like, I'm a Marine, always faithful for the
As
country. It's
as
like,
he as he's
quit
walking out the door. Yeah.
as you quit. I don't think you know what that phrase means. Mike, you
Yeah.
might have been a Marine, but you might have forgotten what the actual translation of Semper Fi
It's
is.
it's got some vibes reminiscent of Donald Trump's Never Surrender on
Yeah.
the same picture of his mugshot where he
When he
literally surrendered.
surrenders. Yeah.
So
Yeah. That is very similar to that for sure.
do you think that the Republican House Conference will kind of learn its lesson from these resignations, or do you think that they're just going to take the lesson from this as being okay? Let's just continue to plunge farther to the right. Like, is there any recalculating happening here, or is it just continue barreling down the exact same path that got them into this mess in the first place?
No recalculating. I think they kind of want to be in the minority. I don't know that they would really say that, but I
Yeah.
think that deep down, like their actions, like what would they be doing differently if they didn't want to be
No,
in
it's
the
true. I mean, like,
minority?
look, they complain about the border. They get a negotiated border deal that conservative Republican James Langford negotiated, and they don't want it. Like, they just need these things to complain about. If they can't complain about them, like if they have the opportunity to actually solve any problems, they balk, even if they're problems that their own party negotiated.
Yeah. So they don't want to solve problems. They want to, create drama. I look at MTG, again, like doing this motion to vacate, quasi motion to vacate. We'll see on Mike Johnson, but it's just like that's what they want to do: performative drama, infighting, complaining, resentment, grievance. That is what is motivating. And I think for many of them, I if Donald Trump is president, again, this goes back to he has authoritarian aspirations. I don't feel like they think that they're going to want to really pass legislation for Trump. They're going to want him to do the dictator on day one stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's kind of the dark underbelly of this. They just don't feel like that they need to try to be a majority governing party, or that they don't want to be one.
I have a question about the work that you and your colleagues at the Bulwark are doing. And by the way, for those watching right now, if you want to hear and see more from Tim, make sure to subscribe to the Bulwark. That's the YouTube channel he's on throughout the week. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. And that'll help build up this pro-democracy ecosystem from left to right that we're building right now. So Tim, with the work that Sarah Longwell does over at the Bulwark, is there any indication that the increasingly extreme House Republican conference is having any impact on like the electorate? Are people seeing this and saying like, okay, look, all that's left are like the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the Lauren Boeberts, the Matt Gaetzes, and Jim Jordans of the party? And is that having any impact on pushing these people away?
Yeah, I mean, so we do, as you mentioned, like we do a bunch of focus groups with these folks, and I just did one with Sarah Longwell over on the YouTube page last weekend that it talks to this group, right? Like Republicans that are wavering on Trump, trying to figure out why, what can push them over. I don't know that we've gotten to the point yet where like Mike Johnson and the extreme House conference is so salient that like that's the thing.
Yeah.
But is it a brick in a layer of just a combination of like this party's too crazy, right? It's just like what is happening, like Donald Trump is so crazy, and then he's sending these bleeps and he's saluting the January 6 people, and then over in Congress you got Marjorie Taylor Greene they're kicking out Kevin McCarthy and like this Mike Johnson, and he's got his he's looking at his kids porn. You know what I mean? Like all of these are like little bullets that like they're adding up to each other. They're just like, this does not feel like a serious party to me. I do think though that the Democrats and those of us in the pro-democracy right could do a better job of messaging to conservatives just how extreme these guys are. Because I think that the laugh about their incompetence is good, right? And it works. Like I think that this contrast between Biden is trying to be like, hey, I'm trying to get results. Look at infrastructure bill. These guys are chaos. These guys are crazy. That's a good contrast. But I think in addition to that, just driving home the extremism of the people who are left, right? And just how far they would go if they did have full control next year on social issues, on abortion, right? Like I think that a lot of that hasn't really sunk in yet, and I think that's kind of a job for the next 6 months.
Do you think that the American people, that voters writ large, do have the capacity to either reward or punish politicians in the House, for example, based on their performance? Or do you think that polarization has set in and it's just like, you vote for your team regardless of how well or how disastrous they do when they have the majority?
It's a good question. I think that, there's the sad side to this. In a lot of cases, not really. Like some of the other focus groups, like a lot of people, particularly in the far right base, the MAGA base, they just want the performative politics. Like the politicians are giving them what they want. But I think you can go too far, and certain districts aren't appropriate for it. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene's in a safe district, but look at Lauren Boebert. And she got chased out of that third district where she was going to lose that race. I thing pretty clearly to a center left Democrat, Adam Frisch, who I think still has a chance to win. And that's my home state, Colorado. So I think you saw this with Madison Cawthorn. I think that, but the examples do have to be pretty extreme outliers, and it has to be in the right locations. It has to be the right message. So I would say that, there's some pretty dark stuff happening in the electorate, and a lot of people in the electorate want the crazy, but not everybody does. And there are reachable voters, and there are reachable districts, and there are going to be key swing races this year where there are extreme Republicans, just like we saw in 2022, where they just went too far. We saw it with Mastriano, Walker, Blake Masters, Kerry Lake. You can go down the list from 22. I think we could see that again in 2024. But, the work has to be done to just demonstrate just how far outside the mainstream these folks are.
Well, look, you yourself occupy that lane of people that we have to be able to reach ahead of November. So, I mean, if people are wondering whether these elusive pro-democracy Republicans exist out there, Tim is a testament to exactly that. And I'm sure that a lot of your viewers and listeners to your podcast and your YouTube channel, are in the same boat as you are. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. We're working through it. Look, I had a guy on last week, Stephen Hayes, who is, maybe a little bit more to my right, but he doesn't like Donald Trump. And he was kind of making the argument, for 2024, maybe you just don't vote for either. Maybe you don't vote for either of these candidates. I was strongly disagreeing with that and making the case to him that, all right, well, maybe if you live in Maryland, you can do that. But if you live in one of these key states and you're a conservative and you hate Donald Trump, you have to, even if you don't like Joe Biden, you have to hold your nose and vote for him. And we had a very spirited exchange. I looked at the comments. I think a lot of folks in the comments were pretty sympathetic to my perspective on that. Now some of them are liberals that are commenting, but many of them are these folks that are never Trumpers, center right people that are thinking this through, and then they have networks, right? So I just think it's important to have these conversations. And obviously the MAGA world is gross, and there's people you don't want to platform, but I think it's important to talk to people that I know it seems like they don't exist, but there are a small number of critical people out there who do exist that are kind of weighing, okay, I don't like this crazy part of the Republican Party. Can I get there for Joe Biden? Should I just sit it out? What should I do? And I think that we have to communicate to those folks.
Well, I think that just underscores the importance of people like you in this ecosystem here. So again, for anybody watching right now, to support the work that Tim and his team do, please make sure to subscribe to The Bulwark. Again, I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
I'm Tim Miller.
This is Inside the Right.